ADHD is commonly described as a focus problem, but the core issue lies much deeper in the brain's dopamine system. Dopamine regulates motivation, reward, and the ability to sustain effort, and in ADHD, this system often functions inconsistently. Because dopamine levels fluctuate or don't activate strongly enough, the brain struggles to maintain interest in tasks that aren't immediately stimulating. This creates the appearance of poor attention. The real problem is that the brain cannot generate the internal reward needed to stay engaged. When something is exciting, urgent, or highly stimulating, dopamine rises, so focus suddenly becomes effortless. When something is routine, slow, or predictable, dopamine stays low, making engagement feel almost impossible no matter how hard the person tries. This is why someone with ADHD can pay attention extremely well in certain situations, hyperfocus, while completely zoning out in others. It's not a lack of discipline or willpower, it's neurochemistry. Understanding ADHD through dopamine explains why impulsivity, boredom sensitivity, emotional intensity, and novelty-seeking all show up because the brain is constantly trying to regulate a reward system that doesn't activate in a typical way. Intimacy naturally produces a surge of dopamine, and for someone with ADHD, whose brain already struggles to regulate this neurotransmitter, the effect can feel amplified. These spikes can make moments of closeness feel far more engaging, rewarding, and emotionally charged than everyday experiences. Dopamine temporarily stabilizes attention, making the person more present, connected, and focused than usual. Once the dopamine drops back to baseline, the shift can feel abrupt. A person with ADHD might become distracted, mentally distant, or less responsive, not because interest has faded, but because the brain can't sustain that elevated state. This fluctuation can influence behavior in ways that feel confusing to both partners, creating cycles of intense connection followed by unexpected disengagement. The ADHD brain isn't reacting to the person, it's reacting to the chemistry. Moments of intimacy activate a reward system that works beautifully in the moment, but becomes harder to maintain afterward, shaping emotional rhythm, attachment patterns, and consistency in ways most people don't realize. ADHD brains are constantly searching for stimulation because their baseline dopamine levels tend to be lower or more unstable. When the environment isn't providing enough novelty, excitement, or reward, the brain becomes restless and starts looking for something that will create a stronger internal signal. Intimacy happens to be one of the few experiences that naturally delivers a rich combination of sensory input, emotional intensity, physical closeness, and neurochemical reward all at once. Because of this, CX can feel more vivid or amplified for someone with ADHD. Brain locks onto the heightened sensations because they provide exactly the level of stimulation it's been craving. Touch, eye contact, emotional closeness, and physical rhythm create a flood of sensory detail that cuts through the usual mental noise. In those moments, ADHD mind becomes more focused, more regulated, and more grounded than usual. The experience feels fuller, richer, and more immersive because it temporarily satisfies the brain's constant hunger for stimulation, creating a depth of intensity that others might not experience in the same way. Hyperfocus is one of the most misunderstood aspects of ADHD because it appears to contradict the idea of attention problems. When something captures enough emotional or psychological significance, the ADHD brain can lock onto it with exceptional intensity. During intimacy, this hyperfocus can draw a person into the moment so fully that everything else fades into the background. Thoughts quiet down, distractions disappear, and their entire awareness narrows to the connection happening right in front of them. This creates an experience that feels unusually immersive. Emotional cues become sharper, physical sensations feel more pronounced, and the sense of presence becomes almost overwhelming in a positive way. Time can feel distorted. The moment stretches longer than it really is. The person may appear deeply attentive, passionate, intertwined with their partner because for that period, the brain is pouring all of its energy into one single experience. It's not something they choose. It's a neurological state where the mind becomes fully absorbed, allowing for kind of emotional and physical depth that feels rare and intoxicating. When hyperfocus fades, the shift is often sudden. Change can feel confusing or even hurtful to a partner who doesn't understand what's happening internally. During hyperfocus, with ADHD may seem intensely present, fully engaged, expressive, attentive, and emotionally connected. But once the brain naturally transitions out of that state, their attention disperses, their energy dips, or their mind drifts to something unrelated. This isn't a choice. It's simply the brain returning to its usual rhythm after an unusually concentrated burst of interest and dopamine. To the other person, this change can look like emotional withdrawal or a loss of interest because the contrast is so sharp. A partner might wonder why the warmth, closeness, or attentiveness seems to disappear so quickly. What they're seeing isn't rejection. It's the ADHD brain recalibrating after operating in an unusually intense mode. The person may still feel connected, still care deeply, and still value the moment they shared. They just no longer have access to the heightened state that made them look so engaged. This gap between internal experience and external behavior often leads to misunderstandings, even though the person's feelings haven't actually changed at all. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria describes an emotional pattern in which even small hints of criticism, disapproval, disappointment feel disproportionately intense. For many people with ADHD, this reaction isn't about being overly emotional or dramatic. It's rooted in a nervous system that processes feedback with heightened sensitivity. A comment that others might shrug off can feel like a significant personal failure. Even neutral expressions can be interpreted as signs of rejection. This sensitivity often shows up in close relationships where emotional stakes are high. A slow text reply, a shift in tone, or a moment of awkwardness can trigger a rush of anxiety or self-doubt. A person may replay conversations, analyze their partner's expressions, or assume they've done something wrong, even when nothing is actually wrong. The emotional pain feels real and immediate, almost like a physical sting. Because the reaction happens so quickly and powerfully, it can lead to avoidance, people pleasing, over, apologizing, withdrawing to prevent further hurt. The intensity isn't a choice. It's an involuntary response that reflects how deeply the ADHD brain registers the possibility of being dismissed or unimportant. For someone with ADHD, subtle or minor signals in intimacy, like a pause in conversation, A distracted glance, delayed response, or a slight change in tone can feel magnified into something much larger than it actually is. The brain interprets these small cues through the lens of heightened emotional sensitivity, amplifying their impact and making them feel like personal rejection or disapproval. A partner's momentary distraction, which most people would barely notice, can trigger intense self-doubt, anxiety, or worry about the state of the relationship. This heightened perception often leads to overanalyzing every gesture, word, or expression as the ADHD brain seeks to protect itself from perceived emotional harm. The person may replay the interaction repeatedly, imagining all the ways they could have caused disappointment or imagining worst-case scenarios. Even neutral or unintended signals can set off strong emotional reactions, creating a cycle where minor incidents feel overwhelming. This sensitivity can make intimacy feel unpredictable or risky, not because the partner is doing anything wrong, because the ADHD brain experiences emotional input in a much more amplified and immediate way than average. During moments of intimacy, the ADHD brain can move quickly between emotional states, creating rapid shifts that may seem abrupt or unpredictable to both the individual and their partner. One moment, a person might feel fully engaged, affectionate, and deeply connected. The next, they might become distracted, restless, or emotionally distant. These transitions are not intentional or reflective of how much they care. They stem from how the brain processes stimuli, dopamine, and emotional regulation in real time. Because the ADHD brain reacts strongly to novelty, stimulation, and emotional cues, changes in the environment, the partner's behavior, or even internal thoughts can trigger noticeable swings in mood and responsiveness. Joke that lands differently than expected, a minor interruption, or a fleeting thought can instantly redirect focus and alter emotional tone. This rapid shifting can make intimacy feel like a roller coaster. Peaks of intense connection are quickly followed by valleys of distraction or detachment. The person may appear inconsistent. These fluctuations are rooted in neurochemistry rather than intention, and they happen automatically, often without conscious awareness. Impulsivity in ADHD doesn't stem from poor character or a lack of self-control. It originates in the way the brain processes rewards, delays, and emotional cues. The neural circuits that regulate planning, inhibition, and long-term thinking often function differently in ADHD, making it harder to pause before acting or to consider consequences fully in the moment. This isn't a conscious choice, it's a structural and chemical pattern in the brain that drives quicker reactions to stimuli, especially when the situation is emotionally charged or highly rewarding. During intimacy, this neurological impulsivity can show up as sudden bursts of enthusiasm, spontaneous physical gestures, or rapid shifts in emotional expression. The brain is seeking stimulation and reward, and it reacts to what feels immediately engaging without the usual internal breaks. This can sometimes be misinterpreted by partners as recklessness or irresponsibility, but is simply the ADHD brain responding to heightened arousal, novelty, and emotional intensity. The impulses are immediate, genuine, and rooted in neurobiology rather than moral failure, reflecting a brain wired to react to the present moment more intensely than most. ADHD, novelty acts as a powerful trigger for the brain's reward system. Because dopamine regulation is often inconsistent, experiences that are new, exciting, or unpredictable provide the stimulation that the brain craves. In relationships, this can make fresh activities, spontaneous gestures, unexpected emotional moments feel intensely rewarding. Simple routines or predictable interactions may fail to engage the brain in the same way, leaving the person feeling restless, bored, or unfulfilled even when the relationship is stable and loving. The ADHD brain naturally seeks out variety and stimulation. Novel experiences can create heightened emotional and physical engagement. This might look like planning surprises, introducing new ways to connect, or reacting more strongly to unexpected acts of intimacy. Even minor changes in tone, setting, behavior can be interpreted as deeply meaningful because the brain is wired to respond strongly to the unfamiliar. The combination of dopamine spikes and emotional intensity makes novelty feel especially significant, and moments of unpredictability can produce a sense of excitement and connection that routine interactions may not provide. Individuals with ADHD, emotions are often experienced more vividly, which can make moments of intimacy feel especially profound. When feelings are intense, every touch, glance, or word carries more weight, creating a heightened sense of presence and connection. This amplified emotional experience can make interactions feel deeply meaningful, as if the bond between partners is stronger and more immediate. The ADHD brain registers these emotional cues more sharply. Small gestures of affection or vulnerability can produce a powerful sense of closeness. During intimacy, this intensity can allow someone with ADHD to engage fully, respond passionately, and connect on multiple levels, physically, emotionally, and mentally, all at once. Emotional highs can make affection feel more rewarding, and shared vulnerability can accelerate trust and bonding. Even subtle shifts in mood or tone are noticed acutely, allowing the person to respond empathetically and authentically. This deep emotional engagement, while sometimes overwhelming, can create intimate experiences that are richer and more memorable, fostering a sense of closeness that feels rare and significant. People with ADHD often form connections rapidly in the early stages of a relationship because their brains are wired to respond strongly to novelty, excitement, and emotional stimulation. Rush of dopamine that comes from new experiences and interpersonal engagement makes initial interactions feel intensely rewarding. Gestures, shared laughter, or moments of vulnerability can trigger a heightened sense of closeness, making the bond appear stronger and more immediate than it might in a more gradual relationship progression. This rapid bonding is also influenced by heightened emotional sensitivity, allows someone with ADHD to pick up on subtle cues and respond with empathy and enthusiasm. They may invest emotionally, physically, and mentally very quickly, expressing care and attention in ways that feel deeply present. The brain's craving for stimulation reinforces this pattern as the novelty of a new partner provides a continuous source of engagement and reward. As a result, early relationships with ADHD individuals often feel intense, exciting, and highly connected, depth of engagement that can surprise both the person with ADHD and their partner. For individuals with ADHD, I see you smiling. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria, RSD, can intensify performance anxiety because even the smallest perceived mistake or misstep feels magnified. In intimate situations, a minor lapse, like a moment of hesitation, a perceived awkward gesture, or uncertainty about a partner's reaction, can trigger intense self-consciousness. The brain interprets these small signals as potential rejection, creating a surge of anxiety that can interfere with confidence and presence. This heightened sensitivity means that a person with ADHD may overanalyze their actions, replay scenarios repeatedly in their mind, or worry excessively about whether they are meeting their partner's expectations. Physiological reactions like increased heart rate, tension, mental racing can compound the stress, making it harder to relax and stay engaged. Even when there is no actual disapproval or criticism, the emotional experience feels very real, and the anxiety can disrupt natural responses during intimacy. The intensity of RSD amplifies concern about performance, making ordinary uncertainties feel like significant threats to connection and self-worth. Many individuals with ADHD experience shame around intimacy because their behaviors and emotional responses are often misinterpreted by themselves and others. Rapid mood shifts, hyperfocus, impulsivity, or intense emotional reactions can be seen as flaws, overreactions, or a lack of care, even though they are rooted in neurological patterns rather than personal failings. When partners, friends, society at large respond with confusion, criticism, or judgment, it reinforces a sense of inadequacy or wrongness in intimate situations. This misunderstanding can lead someone with ADHD to internalize shame, believing that they are somehow incapable of sustaining connection, managing emotions, or performing normally in relationships. They may begin to hide their natural responses, suppress vulnerability, or second-guess their feelings in order to avoid perceived rejection or disapproval. Over time, this creates a cycle where the very traits that make their connection intense and authentic are seen as liabilities, feeding self-criticism and discomfort with intimacy. The shame is not a reflection of the individual's character, rather a response to the mismatch between neurodivergent patterns and societal expectations of emotional and relational behavior. People with ADHD may struggle with consistency in desire or attention, expend it, and do not add the conclusions or subheadings in it for people with ADHD. Sustaining consistent desire or attention in relationships can be challenging because their brains are highly sensitive to novelty, stimulation, and emotional fluctuations. Interest and focus are closely tied to dopamine levels, which naturally rise in response to engaging or exciting stimuli and drop when experiences become routine or predictable. This means that even in a loving and committed relationship, moments that feel familiar or unstimulating can lead to a temporary decrease in attention, emotional engagement, or sexual desire. This inconsistency is not about a lack of care or commitment. It reflects how the ADHD brain processes reward and stimulation. One day, partner may feel intensely connected, fully enthusiastic, while on another day, the same person may seem distracted, restless, emotionally distant. Small changes in routine environment or mood can shift attention rapidly, and even minor distractions can feel magnified. The fluctuations can be confusing for both the person with ADHD and their partner. External behavior may not match the underlying feelings of affection, desire, or attachment, making consistency appear harder to achieve than it truly is. Individuals with ADHD often experience heightened sensory sensitivity, which means that sights, sounds, touch, and other physical sensations are registered more intensely than in neurotypical brains. During intimate moments, this sensitivity can amplify the physical and emotional experience, making touch feel more pleasurable closeness more profound, and subtle cues from a partner more noticeable. Every gesture, tone of voice, or expression can carry additional emotional weight, creating a richness in connection that is deeply immersive and often intensely rewarding. At the same time, this same sensitivity can become overwhelming if the sensory input exceeds what the brain can comfortably process. A sudden movement, a loud noise, or even a minor distraction can trigger a strong reaction that pulls attention away from the moment, creating stress, discomfort, or emotional withdrawal. The intensity of sensations can fluctuate rapidly, meaning that the same stimulus can feel enjoyable at one moment and overwhelming at another. This dual nature of sensory processing, where intimacy can feel both profoundly engaging and potentially overstimulating, shapes how ADHD individuals experience emotional and physical connection, influencing how present, responsive, and engaged they appear in intimate interactions. The wiring of the ADHD brain often amplifies affectionate and passionate behaviors because emotional and reward circuits are highly reactive to stimuli. When someone with ADHD feels a connection, their brain responds with strong dopamine and emotional signals, making gestures of affection, expressions of love, or passionate moments feel more intense and compelling. Simple acts like holding hands, maintaining eye contact, verbal affirmations, or physical closeness can carry heightened significance and energy, creating a sense of immediacy and depth in the interaction. This heightened responsiveness can make individuals with ADHD appear extraordinarily warm, attentive, and emotionally available in moments of intimacy. They may express their feelings with greater enthusiasm, spontaneity, and vulnerability than others, often responding to the partner's cues with amplified energy. The intensity is not performed or calculated. It is a natural outcome of the ADHD brain's sensitivity to reward, novelty, and emotional input. Even subtle shifts in a partner's mood or gestures can trigger strong, affectionate reactions, creating experiences that feel profoundly connected, immersive, and emotionally rich. In relationships involving someone with ADHD, communication breakdowns often arise from the natural cycles of attention, emotion, and arousal that the brain experiences. The ADHD brain does not maintain a constant state of focus or emotional engagement. Instead, it fluctuates in response to dopamine levels, novelty stimulation, and internal thought patterns. During periods of hyperfocus, a person may be fully attentive, deeply engaged, and responsive, but once the hyperfocus fades, their attention can shift abruptly to other thoughts or tasks. These shifts can make partners feel ignored, dismissed, or disconnected, even though the person with ADHD still cares and is emotionally present in their own way. Impulsivity, distraction, sudden emotional changes may cause responses to be delayed, incomplete, or misaligned with a partner's expectations. Over time, without understanding these natural cycles, partners may misinterpret behavior as intentional neglect or lack of interest. The brain's fluctuating attention and emotional states, combined with heightened sensitivity to feedback and novelty, create patterns where communication can feel inconsistent or fragmented, not because of a lack of effort, because the neurobiology driving thought, focus, and emotion operates differently than expected. Individuals with ADHD often replay intimate moments in their minds long after they occur, analyzing every word, gesture, and reaction. Because their brains are highly sensitive to emotional cues and potential rejection, they may scrutinize interactions for mistakes, missteps, or signs that they didn't meet their partner's expectations. Even neutral or minor occurrences can be magnified, leading to rumination about whether they behaved correctly, expressed affection properly, or responded appropriately. This overthinking can create a cycle where what was intended as a natural, spontaneous moment becomes a source of stress or self-criticism. The person may imagine alternative scenarios, worry about perceived shortcomings, or obsess over details that most people would quickly forget. Emotional intensity, heightened sensitivity, and the brain's tendency to seek patterns and meaning all contribute to this prolonged mental engagement. As a result, the ADHD mind can remain mentally and emotionally invested in an interaction long after it has ended, ordinary moments of intimacy into extended periods of reflection and evaluation. For someone with ADHD, emotional vulnerability is experienced with remarkable intensity because the brain processes feelings more sharply and acutely. When they open up or share intimate emotions, every thought and sensation is amplified, making the experience feel all-consuming. This can create a sense of being exposed or overstimulated as the combination of raw feelings, physical sensations, heightened sensitivity can become overwhelming in the moment. At the same time, this same intensity makes vulnerability profoundly meaningful. Expressing emotions fully allows the person to connect on a deep level, creating bonds that feel authentic, immediate, and powerful. Every reaction from a partner, whether verbal, physical, or nonverbal, is registered with heightened awareness, which can reinforce feelings of closeness and trust. The interplay of emotional intensity and genuine openness produces experiences of intimacy that are rich, memorable, and deeply impactful, even if navigating them requires managing periods of overwhelm. Overwhelm paired with significance is a defining feature of how ADHD shapes emotional connection. For individuals with ADHD, routines can provide a sense of stability and predictability that helps support intimacy, offering a reliable structure for connection, communication, and shared activities. Knowing what to expect can reduce stress, minimize misunderstandings, and create a foundation for trust and emotional safety. Regular patterns like consistent check-ins, date nights, predictable ways of showing affection can help the ADHD brain maintain focus and remain emotionally present in the relationship. At the same time, the ADHD brain is highly sensitive to novelty and stimulation, which means that too much repetition or predictability can feel unstimulating or even boring. Activities that once felt engaging can lose their appeal, and the person may struggle to stay fully attentive or emotionally invested when interactions become too routine. Even in a loving and stable relationship, moments of intimacy may require creative approaches, surprises, or small changes to reignite engagement and maintain the brain's interest. Tension between craving novelty and needing structure creates a dynamic where routine supports connection, but must be balanced with stimulation to keep emotional and physical intimacy vibrant. In ADHD, brain's heightened sensitivity to dopamine and reward can blur the lines between emotional closeness and the neurochemical excitement that comes from novelty or stimulation. When someone with ADHD experiences heightened dopamine during intimate moments, the feelings of pleasure, arousal, or exhilaration can be interpreted as a deep emotional bond, even if the connection itself is still developing. Physical touch, passionate interactions, Emotionally charged exchanges can create intense chemical feedback that feels indistinguishable from genuine attachment or long-term intimacy. Can make early stages of relationships feel overwhelmingly intense. The brain amplifies the reward signals, and the person experiences a sense of closeness that may seem immediate or profound. Because dopamine-driven excitement is naturally reinforcing, the ADHD brain may seek out repeated experiences that replicate that feeling, prioritizing the thrill of connection over slower, steadier emotional development. The result is a heightened perception of intimacy that mixes actual emotional closeness with the physiological effects of reward. And stimulation can influence attachment, expectations, and relational pacing. For individuals with ADHD, stress and overstimulation can have a significant impact on intimacy because their brains are already highly sensitive to emotional and sensory input. When stress levels rise, whether from external pressures, internal anxiety, or accumulated sensory input, the brain's ability to focus, regulate emotions, and sustain dopamine-driven motivation can be compromised. This makes it harder to feel present, engaged, motivated during intimate moments. Overstimulation from loud environments, multiple simultaneous demands, intensive emotional experiences can further drain mental and emotional resources, leaving little capacity for connection, vulnerability, desire. Even when the desire for closeness exists, the brain may prioritize managing stress or sensory overload over pursuing intimacy. Physiological responses like increased heart rate, tension, or racing thoughts can interfere with natural arousal and emotional availability. Interactions feel effortful or overwhelming. In these moments, the ADHD brain struggles to balance its need for reward and connection with the demands of an overstimulated or stressed state, resulting in fluctuations in intimacy drive that are neurological rather than relational in nature. Grounding techniques help individuals with ADHD anchor themselves in the present moment, which can significantly enhance emotional presence during intimate interactions. Because ADHD brains are prone to distraction, hyperactive thoughts, and emotional fluctuations, it's easy for attention to drift away from the partner or the experience itself. Grounding strategies, such as focusing on physical sensations, controlled breathing, or mindful awareness of the immediate environment, redirect attention back to the here and now. By engaging the body and senses in a deliberate way, these techniques help regulate the nervous system, reduce mental chatter, and stabilize emotional responses. This creates a more balanced internal state where the person can respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. In intimacy, grounding allows someone with ADHD to be fully aware of a partner's cues, engage in reciprocal emotional exchange, and experience sensations more vividly without becoming overwhelmed. It strengthens focus, improves attunement, makes emotional connection more reliable, helping the brain maintain presence in moments that might otherwise be disrupted by distraction or overstimulation. Mindfulness practices provide a way for individuals with ADHD to observe their thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations without immediately reacting to them, which can help regulate both impulsivity and emotional fluctuations. ADHD brain often experiences rapid shifts in attention and mood, with impulses arising quickly in response to internal or external stimuli. Cultivating mindfulness, a person learns to create a small space between the impulse and the action, noticing urges, emotional spikes, or racing thoughts without automatically acting on them. Techniques like focused breathing, body scans, where known judgmental observation of emotions, strengthen the brain's ability to pause and respond rather than react. This practice reduces the likelihood of impulsive behaviors during intimate or emotionally charged moments, allowing for more deliberate and thoughtful engagement. Additionally, mindfulness enhances awareness of emotional waves, making sudden surges of excitement, anxiety, or frustration easier to recognize and manage. Over time, this helps stabilize reactions, improve emotional regulation, and support more consistent and authentic responses in relationships, creating a foundation for connection that is less reactive and more attuned. Being open with partners about ADHD, related experiences, emotional patterns, and sensitivities can transform how intimacy is perceived and navigated. When individuals share their tendencies, such as rapid emotional shifts, hyperfocus, impulsivity, heightened sensitivity to perceived rejection, it provides context for behaviors that might otherwise be misunderstood. Partners gain insight into why certain reactions occur, reducing the likelihood of misinterpretation or negative assumptions about intent or feelings. Openness also creates a safe environment for expressing vulnerability, allowing the person with ADHD to communicate needs, boundaries, and emotional experiences without fear of judgment. By explaining how their brain works and what triggers overstimulation or anxiety, they invite understanding and empathy, which helps diminish internalized shame. Partners who are informed and aware are better equipped to respond supportively rather than react with confusion or criticism, fostering trust and emotional safety. This transparency strengthens connection, encourages collaboration in problem solving, and helps both individuals navigate intimacy in a way that respects the neurological realities of ADHD while maintaining closeness and mutual understanding. Both partners understand the patterns associated with ADHD. Intimacy can become more predictable, compassionate, and fulfilling. Knowledge of tendencies such as hyperfocus, impulsivity, emotional intensity, sensitivity to perceived rejection allows both individuals to interpret behaviors accurately rather than assigning blame or misunderstanding intent. Recognizing that fluctuations in attention, desire, or emotional responsiveness are rooted in neurobiology, not disinterest or lack of care, creates space for patience and empathy within the relationship. This understanding enables couples to anticipate potential challenges and develop strategies that work for both partners, such as pacing emotional conversations, introducing grounding or mindfulness practices, or creating routines that balance novelty and stability. Framing behaviors within the context of ADHD patterns, partners can communicate more effectively, respond more supportively, collaborate on solutions when difficulties arise. Over time, this awareness fosters a relational environment where intimacy is less reactive and more intentional, and where connection can flourish despite the natural fluctuations of attention, arousal, and emotion. People with ADHD often experience love with remarkable intensity and authenticity because their emotional responses are amplified and deeply felt. When they connect with someone, they engage fully, emotionally, mentally, and physically, allowing themselves to be vulnerable and expressive in ways that can feel immediate and profound. Their heightened sensitivity makes them attuned to subtle cues from their partner, and their brain's craving for meaningful emotional experiences drives them to invest wholeheartedly in the relationship. This intensity often manifests as passionate gestures, enthusiastic communication, and a desire for deep closeness, creating connections that feel vivid and memorable. They may express affection spontaneously, notice nuances in their partner's mood, and respond with heightened empathy and care because their emotional experiences are genuine and unfiltered. Their love is rarely superficial or performative. It reflects the full spectrum of their feelings in real time. This capacity for wholehearted engagement allows ADHD individuals to forge bonds that are authentic, immersive, and deeply human, even if navigating the associated fluctuations in attention or mood requires understanding and patience from both partners. Intimacy is deeply influenced by the brain's dopamine cycle, and for individuals with ADHD, understanding how this cycle operates can transform the way they engage in relationships. Dopamine regulates motivation, reward, and pleasure. Fluctuations in its levels affect attention, desire, and emotional responsiveness. When someone with ADHD recognizes that moments of intense connection, passion, or focus are linked to temporary spikes in dopamine, they can better anticipate periods of high engagement and moments when attention or desire may naturally dip. This awareness allows both partners to interpret behaviors accurately, reducing misunderstandings and emotional friction. It helps the person with ADHD plan for novelty or stimulating experiences to maintain engagement, while also preparing for times when routine or reduced stimulation might make emotional closeness feel more challenging. By aligning expectations with the natural rhythm of the brain's reward system, intimacy becomes more sustainable, intentional, compassionate. Partners can create strategies that honor the neurological patterns at play, fostering consistency in connection, emotional attunement, and physical intimacy while reducing frustration and misinterpretation. ADHD does not inherently weaken relationships. Rather, it changes the way connection is experienced, expressed, and maintained. The neurological patterns associated with ADHD, such as fluctuating attention, emotional intensity, impulsivity, hyperfocus, sensitivity to rejection, shape interactions in ways that differ from neurotypical expectations. These differences can make relationships feel unpredictable at times, but they also bring unique strengths such as heightened passion, authenticity, and responsiveness to emotional cues. Understanding that these behaviors are rooted in brain wiring allows both partners to reinterpret challenges not as flaws or failures, as natural expressions of how the ADHD brain functions. It encourages flexibility, empathy, and creative approaches to maintaining intimacy, communication, and trust, rather than relying solely on conventional norms of consistency and routine. Relationships involving ADHD often thrive when they embrace variability, novelty, and emotional depth, reframing expectations and acknowledging neurological differences. Couples can build a dynamic in which connection is both resilient and richly textured, reflecting the unique ways ADHD shapes attention, emotion, and engagement.